Welcome to Arcana Podcasts. I'm your host, Lee Gerrard-Barlow. Recently, I had a fascinating conversation with two magicians, Cath Thompson and Barry Down. They were both part of a group which functioned circa 1976, which saw the birth of a new system of magic, which came through the English Qaballa, and a new system of Stellar Magick emerged. That system is still in use today and has, if nothing else, flourished more and more, which I hope that this interview gives the opportunity for it to do. They're both incredibly fascinating people. They belonged to the group which was created by a gentleman called Jim Lees. As you will hear in the interview you're about to see, he has now sadly departed. I make an apology in advance. The quality of the video and the sound of the video is not really it's not really up to scratch. However, I put it up as it was, and those who have ears to hear and eyes to see and have discernment will certainly gain a great deal from what you're about to see. So, without further ado, please enjoy the conversation we had. Thank you. Hello there, my name's Lee Gerrard-Barlow, and I'm here today with Cath Thompson and Barry Down. And I've been wanting to do a podcast with you both as guests for quite some time, and we've been in contact quite a bit recently. And Barry and Cath, extremely interesting magicians from the English magical tradition, conterminous, I would say, with the period of time circa the chaos magic, the birth of chaos magic. I would say sort of in the mid 70s, late 70s, around about that time was when that sort of stuff was kicking off, especially around my own hometown of Leeds, Wakefield, which is where I used to live. And they were instrumental. These two chaps here were instrumental in the creation of something which was very little known, but I do believe is becoming increasingly important and shall certainly become more important in the English magical scene and worldwide, I have no doubt, at some point in the future. And that is a specific entity known as English Qaballa. Now, we may all have heard of Qaballah. And the first things, of course, that spring to mind are such things as the Hebrew Qaballa, lesser known Greek Qaballa, and even Latin Qaballa. There's many different various forms of Qaballa, of course. But the English Qaballa is something you don't hear something very much about at all. Now, I'm going to ask Cath and Barry here about how the English Qaballa came about in the first place during that time in 1976.
Right.
Barry, well, I think you were actually part of the original group that where this came about. If you could tell us a little more about this.
Yeah, this was a group of formed by Jim Lees. There was originally 8 of us, and we came from the Hebrew Kabbalistic tradition. I think my first interest in that was from the Golden Dawn and the various rituals and ceremonies of the Golden Dawn and the study of astrology. Jim Lees was a very competent magician and a Kabbalistic astrologer, and he formed this the small group. There was 6 of us originally, and we started doing ceremonial magic in Hoppers Woods. We did Bill Gray's rituals at that time, and it was and studied the esoteric principles of astrology as it relates to the tree of life and so on. And what happened was we developed an interest in some of Crowley's Book of the Law. We decided to have a look at that, or Jim did, and wondered what it was about and so on. And we started doing some of the ceremonies from the planetary ceremonies.
Right, from ellipsis. Yeah,
that's right. Yes, and we, the dramatizations, which were quite amazing, and we were quite elaborate, and we came across post doing those ceremonies. We came across. Remember, at that time, there's a publication called the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail.
Oh yes. Yeah,
exactly. And it brought to our attention on the pentagram formed by the Sun-Venus conjunctions, and so all of this sort of came together at the same time, and we were having a look at the Book of the Law, thinking this is quite an interesting publication and so on. And Jim was said, "Well, let's apply the Hebrew Qaballa much the same way as Crowley had done." And of course, as we know, it doesn't quite come up with anything, because we know that Crowley had put the Book of the Law to one side, I think, for a number of years before he went back to it. And then he's, I think in his biography, he says when he realized the importance of it, having rediscovered it in the attic, he spent the rest of his life trying to retrieve his reputation. And,
so it was something specific that was inside that book. Obviously, that book was there's in the esoteric scene in general, in occultism in general, there's been many books that have been apparently channeled and so on and so forth, and this is one of those books. I'm speaking because there's many people in our audience who are going to be at very different levels, who may or may not be aware of the background of some of this stuff. But there's something inside that book. There was a specific cipher which was channeled inside that book. And I do believe that that's something very important to the discoveries that came later. You can either explain that now or form part of something you want to say later. But that's yes. I do believe, an important part of this, isn't it?
Yes, there was a part which we came to, which was change not so much as a letter. And this was why we were musing on, well, I wonder if there's a Qaballah, and this injunction not to change so much as a letter. And Jim said, well, let's leave the letter A and count 11 letters beyond that, and which came to the letter L, which became L became 2. And then we left that and counted another 11 letters, which gave W, and until we carried right through the alphabet until we got this sequence. And we had a look at it and found that if you drew the alphabet as it was around, and then took the letter A and started to draw a star from in the circle, and found that it made a 26-pointed star. And we rang Bill Gray, and he was an amazing gentleman, and he rather sniffily said, well, does it make a star then? And we said, well, yes, it does actually. And perhaps would you like to come in there a bit, Cath, on that?
Yeah, sure. Yes, within the manuscript of the Book of the Law, on the 16th page of the third day's writing, there is a grid with letters along the top and numbers down the side. And if you write letters down the side, starting with A in the top left-hand corner, and then write the rest of the B, C, D, E, F, and so forth, and fill the grid up like that. Within the text, there is a diagonal line and a reference to this diagonal line. It says, this line drawn is a key. And if you take that diagonal line and put it over the grid, the letters on the diagonal come to A, L, W, H, which is the order of the English alphabet. So that's another confirmation that's the correct solution.
Yeah, and of course Crowley himself had a crack at it, didn't he? And that's how that grid came about. You know, he sort of had a crack at trying to solve this thing during his own lifetime. Didn't quite get it though, did he?
No, he didn't. He came close. Some of his writings, some of the numbers that he pinpointed, like the number 93, which is the value of Thelema, and the number 418, which is some other significant expression in either Hebrew or Greek, I forget what. He pointed to those two numbers as being highly significant, but he never quite managed to justify any of his statements or give reasoned arguments as to why this should be so. So yeah, no, he never quite made it. He's said to have died with the words "I am perplexed." So yeah.
Yes, and I think it was we had a very interesting phenomena happened at this discovery that evening. We used to gather every single weekend.
This was in Tamworth, yeah?
This was in Tamworth at Jim's house.
Right.
And there was the six of us gathered together, and we would be doing studying Qaballah and sort of this investigation at this point. And when this epiphany of that Jim came up of which Jim put, said, let's try this with the letter A and counting of the 11. And we decided to sort of add some numbers up on in those days, the early days of electronics, and everybody had a calculator. And so we started adding various numbers for various words on the calculator. And there were 6 of these. And every time we put a number in, it came up with it was 286. And whatever we did, it just came up 286. And,
for everybody.
Everybody in the room. We were in Jim's back room. And Jim said, this is really odd. And he said, well, he said, I'll take it through to Jan. She can add it up. Jan was Jim's wife. And she was in the front room. She was a Scorpio with Uranus rising in Gemini.
Right.
And,
because recently you did a chart for this, didn't you? Where you've actually
very interesting, yes.
Right.
And we took it through. So, well, if anybody's going to get it right, Jan will. And for some reason, whatever she added up, she came to 286, which even Jan, being a Scorpio, was quite perplexed about.
And this was completely independent. Completely independent from everybody else.
Yeah, we were in the back room by the log fire, and as we often gathered there to have these wonderful discussions, and Jan was knitting away and reading Les Miserables in French. She was quite a switched on lady. So it was a good sort of control, if you like. And Cath, I'm going to ask you to elaborate on the 286.
Yes, it's a key number because it's the sum total of 22 times 13, where 22 represents the Hebrew alphabet, 22 letters, and maybe 13 is a key to some part of Hebrew Qaballa. And 286 is also the sum of 26 times 11. 26 letters of the English alphabet and the key number
in the star.
11.
Yes.
Yes. And Jim had a good eye for mathematics, being from a scientific background.
I was going to ask you a little bit about Jim's background, because that's something that I've never really heard too much about. So he was from a scientific background.
Yes. He was born at the outbreak of World War II, and so in Bolton, which is not the most pleasant of circumstances to start your life. And he could remember where he was before he was born.
Yes.
And so he had this contrast between all the peace and love and light of pre-birth, and then all the post-industrial, just at the dawn of World War II.
Wow.
Sort of filth and squalor.
Wow.
Of Bolton in Lancashire.
Yeah.
At the end of the cotton industry, as it was.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so he had these two ideas going on from as soon as he got aware of the circumstances in which he was living. And he became a chemist. And he investigated psychology, trying to find some answers to this contrast of ideas that he had. And so he studied psychology in some depth, and decided that it didn't really have any answers that fulfilled his desires. And then he was turned on to astrology. He met an astrologer who did a horary astrology chart for him, and he was so impressed with it, he decided that was what he was going to do next.
If I can just stop you there, because I think this is a perfect point to actually introduce the fact that obviously astrology and the magical part of how the EQ evolved is a very, very important part of the tradition, which has been developing ever since Jim found, and you were all there, finding Barry and Jim and the other group found the key at the time. The astro-magical part of it has become so very important. So I just wanted to introduce the fact that these aspects of things are still actively practiced here by Barry and Cath. Barry's now over in New Zealand, of course, and later on in this interview, we'll basically show you how you can get in touch with Barry as well regarding what he's doing. But I just wanted to introduce that fact because you're both still actively working with these principles that we're talking about in this interview. So for anybody out there who really needs to find these chaps, I think you've got a good way of doing it now. I know that for a fact. I myself was trying to find these two here for many years. It's only recently that I managed to get properly in contact with you. So it's really, really interesting to hear the background of Jim, because that's something that I've not heard too much about. And so to discover now that he actually came from this kind of a background and had a scientific training, and the fact that he was also a chemist and a psychologist, it's incredibly interesting to hear.
Yes, he was trained in analytical chemistry. He worked as a metallurgist in a foundry. Yes, he was analysing bronzes.
Oh, wow.
different mixtures of metals to make different bronzes for different purposes, and this kind of thing. So it's quite alchemical.
Yeah, very much. I was going to say he must have had his forge going and everything like that.
Yeah. Oh, he did his own chemical experiments at home. Yes, and then from the astrological studies that he did, he discovered the Key of Solomon and the notion of planetary spirits. And so he did that for a while, and then he discovered other texts that were available at the time, and just devoured them as practices. So he worked his way through Franz Barden, for example, and through Crowley's rituals, the Borner's Rite, and Liber Samek and Rash and these other exercises, and so. So he was very knowledgeable, was he not, Barry, and very experienced.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Well, it sounds like he was very, very fitted for what was going to be happening. You know, like he had a very well versed, very well rounded background in all of the areas that were necessary for him to receive, or at least encourage an opening of such.
Yes, and that was when he, decided to start the group, back then, and it was. We did a lot of talismanic magic from the Key of Solomon, invocations and consecration of talismans and so on. And but Jim's early life, he was greatly influenced by his grandmother, and he often spoke, very fondly about his grandmother, and she would often have, he said, groups of gypsy women, these matriarchs would come round, and he was only a little boy, and she was a great storyteller, and he was sort of party to these conversations between his grandmother and these matriarchs, about mystical and magical stuff. This was as his childhood. It was very rich.
He would tell how he'd come home from school, and his grandmother would say, I was talking to your great uncle Benjamin today. And Jim would know full well that great uncle Benjamin had been dead these 50 years.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's fascinating to hear these little bits of background on Jim. That's something. Thank you for that. That's something that I've not really come across until now. So thank you for filling me in on that. Of course, the other thing is Cath. Cath has been writing for all of our listeners out there. Cath has been documenting and publishing lots of the works that Jim left behind as well, because Jim died quite a few years ago now, didn't he? And,
2015.
Pardon?
Yeah,
2015. Yeah, yes. I know, because I actually tried to get in touch with him and just about succeeded, and then wanted to strike up a conversation, and then somebody unfortunately wrote to me, told me he'd just died, which was very, very unfortunate at the time.
Yes.
So that was back then. But you've been carrying on publishing his works, and books of that kind are available, because you published a number of books now, at least 7 books.
7 it is, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Jim published some of the work himself in a magazine called the New Equinox, British Journal of Magic.
Yeah, I remember that.
Jim did 5 editions of that. And while that magazine was in process, as it were, between the 1st and the 5th, Jake Stratton Kent came along and introduced himself to the scene.
Yeah.
And he wrote an article that was published in Jim's magazine. And so our group got to know Jake and Jake's group, and we shared ideas and results. There was quite a bit of communication between us, and Jake took over the format of that magazine and did 11 editions of his own, publishing an enormous quantity of EQ theory and practice.
Yeah.
And but when Jim died, there was a lot of work that hadn't been published, that Jake hadn't been involved with, and so he hadn't got any of it to publish himself. It was work that was done in Tamworth rather than work that was done in Frome, which is where Jake was based. And it seemed to me to be important to put it into a format that would last, as a book will last. 100, 200 years is not a problem for a book. It is a problem for loose sheets of paper. So I put this to the remaining members of the group who were able to turn up to the funeral, and I said, what do you think we should do, or what do you think I should do? Because I was Jim's literary executor. And we agreed that I should write it into at least one book.
Right, and it turned into something.
Well, I thought I could write one big book and take a number of years over it and maybe not finish it for one reason or another, or I could divide it up into a set of books.
Yeah,
you've got a better chance with doing that, I thought.
Cath, could you tell our viewers how you got involved in the group, because you came a little later than Barry, because Barry was there sort of at the beginning. And so first of all, Barry, if I could just quickly go back to Barry, and Barry, could you just tell me what year it was that you first came across Jim, and how you first came across him? If you could just quickly let us know, and then go back to Cath.
Oh my goodness! So it was at least, I think I must have been about 23, so that would be 1972, 1973, something like that.
Yeah.
You know, I went across there, and at that time there was just Jim and Carol, Sister Thelema, and Stefan Dinovich, Brother Thoth. And I was introduced. I was great friends with Brother Thoth, and he said, "You've got to meet this guy," you know. And it's all started there. I met Jim, and we all got on very well, and the three of us started doing on those as a magical group with just the three of us at that time.
All right.
And that's when we were doing the Bill Gray ceremonies in the woods, and we added a couple more people came along, to make that group, and we formed our circle up in the woods at that time.
So Cath, back to Cath. Cath, when you came along, how did you manage to come into this strange assortment of people?
My parents moved to Tamworth in 1975, I think, or maybe 1974.
So this was not long before the discovery of the key. Yeah.
Yes. And in the course of just hanging out and getting to know people in this town, I happened to meet one of the group members, and I happened to go to his house, which was a popular meeting place for people of diverse interests, let's say.
Yeah, right.
And he had all these magical books, these occult books, and these occult publications, and packs of tarot cards, and glitter in the carpet, all kinds of stuff. which was very interesting. And he had an enumerated copy of the Book of the Law.
Oh, wow.
The group, one of the first things they did once they'd got the key was to work out the values of all the words in the Book of the Law, and then to type the Book of the Law with all the word values entered underneath each word. And then to photocopy these typescripts and staple them together, and everybody had one to study and mess about with. And so I came across this thing, and it captivated me entirely.
So you were a wee bairn at that point, weren't you?
I was
18 or something?
Yeah, or something like that.
Something like 18 years old, yeah.
About 18, yes.
Wow,
yes.
wow. Okay, yeah.
Yes. And so I became very interested in this, and I kept showing up at his place on any feeble excuse and just sitting down and reading a few more pages of it until I'd read the whole thing through on a sequence of days and weeks. And I was finally invited to join this group, and so I was duly initiated.
So after that point in time, I mean, it's, from what you've told me in private conversations in recent times, it sounds like after that point in time, you were a very close-knit group, working quite strongly for quite some time after that.
Very much so, very much so. I'd travel over to Tamworth from Leicester on a Friday night. In those days, sometimes hitchhiking, to get there, and it was a very, very intense study time. Stay there all, every single weekend for years, Kath? It was we were a very intense and very close-knit group. Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
So you kind of tried out so many different approaches, so many different things, went through many different magical workings. Could you describe some of those and for our listeners, and where it eventually took you?
Let's think. Really, I think it was a lot of a lot of times up in we did a lot of ceremony up in Hopwith Woods. That was there. We had a lovely magical circle in the beech woods, which was wonderful. As I say, we did some of the pre English Qaballa. We were doing some of the traditional witchcraft rituals in ceremonies. East would stand, I stand for favors I pray. I pray the Lord of, and so on. Those sort of things.
Yes.
It was really lovely, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was. We were still doing Bill Gray's rituals when I joined.
Right.
Yes.
Bill Gray's seasonal rites were my first experience of ceremonial magic.
Right.
It was lovely.
I loved it. I thought it was just the best thing. Better than anything I'd ever experienced before.
Wow.
Very much in the English and Western magical tradition. It was a lovely time and great fun and much bonhomie and adventures. It was really, really lovely. I'd like to say, Kath, when you was talking about the grid in the manuscript of the Book of the Law, where there's the injunction in the Book of the Law that always should the original manuscript be a facsimile of it, be printed whenever the Book of the Law's manuscript is printed up. And I think Crowley, in his words, said it stopped him Crowleyfying the whole lot. And that grid where it says this circle squared is a clue also. On that page, when we discovered it, we said, oh my gosh, this is a map reference. And Jim's house, if you look on the manuscript, you'll see a square, this circle squared, and the rather sort of drawn line, which is a line that's drawn across the grid. If you look at it as a map reference, it follows exactly where Jim's house is. The line is a railway line that ran at the back of Jim's house. And the circle squared is the point on the map where his house was. It was one of the Edwardian railway cottages. And before Jim moved there, it already had a name. And the name of the house was Rosie Cross. And there were so many coincidences. That was just sort of one of the bemusing things. Oh, crikey, look at this,
Very interesting. Very interesting. So yes. So I mean, when this actual event occurred, this was in 1976, I do believe, wasn't it? Was it November 1976?
Yes.
And this is interesting because the actual cipher is referred to as 276 in that particular book. So that's interesting as well, isn't it? The fact that you've got this reference to it being 76, which I do believe was a dragon year that year as well, in the Chinese astrology system.
Right. Yeah.
I do believe.
Yeah.
And what I was going to say is, it's always been when I've been familiar with the English Qaballa, one of the things which comes across very strongly to me is that it's almost as if this cipher, this particular string of numbers and letters, is actually in a way appears to me to be like the very core thing which has been planted inside the heart of the book. So it's almost like this thing which has been like the whole book's like this package around this one thing. That's my understanding of it in any case. And so it seems very much that was very key to the development of the English Qaballa. Am I correct?
Yes, I would definitely say so. That string of letters and numbers was subjected to evaluation, just like everything else, adding up the totals of different combinations of the letters. And we found, or Stefan found, that the first 10 characters add to 58, which is the value of Libra.
Yeah.
And then the next 8 characters add to 93, which is the value of Scorpio. And then the last 10 characters, there's 28 altogether, the last 10 characters add to 200, which is the value of manifestation. And so the idea grew to attribute both sets of 10 to a pattern like the Hebrew tree of life. Mm-hmm. So the last 10, the manifestation 10, are placed on a traditional Hebrew tree of life. And the section that adds to 93 are placed in the line above the traditional Hebrew Kether. And then there's another 10 characters which were arranged like the perfected Hebrew tree of life, with Malkuth raised to the position of Darth. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then you have a top tree and a joining line and a bottom tree. And hey presto, you have branches and a trunk and you have roots. And the roots of manifestation, the universe as we know it, and the branches, which have the value of Libra, which is the sign of balance, represents the state of the sort of heavenly perfection or unmanifest.
So, I mean, all these things are very deep, much more deeply explained, of course, in Cath's books. So, like, you'll get a very, very good understanding of that. But we will, on this podcast, sort of at least break it down in the sense that what is being described here is a rather miraculous, astounding, in fact, extrapolation of the astro-magical principles rooted inside the English alphabet, forming an English gematria system. And what we have here is, and no matter where you look, this is how it strikes me, no matter where you look within all the traditions, going right back to Egypt, right back to the Hall of Judgment, right back to the passage through the judgment, and right through to the field of reeds, which you see, for example, in the Papyrus of Ani, which to me visually demonstrates the entire cycle that we're speaking about here. This is what, as Cath was saying, all of these things added together, all of the 4 signs which follow from the Libra up to Christmas, basically, isn't it? Equal that miraculous number 418 again, which is incredible. Yeah. So you've got the entire cycle there. Could you say a little more on that?
Yeah, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn is judgment and death, and the immediate post-mortem state.
Right.
And then the transformation and uniting with the spirit in Capricorn. Capricorn being in the zodiac represented by Baphomet, who has the light of heaven between his horns.
And of course, in the English Qaballa, that's equivalent to another concept some may be familiar with in these texts, which is the Ordeal X, which is which obviously, if you could say a little more about how these cycles interact with each other and how they may propel people into certain conditions, which may lead on to how the group, in a sense, fell apart.
That was very dramatic of you, Lee. Barry?
Yeah. I was going to say, when you look at what has evolved from this English Qaballa as applied to the manuscript, has evolved into a form of Stellar Magick.
Yes.
Which is the whole essence of this, is coming to understand we as our personality manifest in the world has our connection with the universe and divinity, and bringing that connection with divinity into egoic consciousness. And we start in the zodiac with Aries, the birth of the ego. Here I am, the baby's arrived in the world, and it's so you get the manifestation of Aries. Here I am, what's going on? Absorbing knowledge into everything, lots of enthusiasm in an egoic sense. And then you get the Taurian. These are the evolution of the personality through the chart. And you have the Taurian, the senses. The ego starts tasting, feeling, smelling, all the senses. And then you get Gemini, communication, where recognizing the other and communicating with the other, youth, and so on, learning. And then the Cancerian stage, establishing one's family and unit in the world. And then Leo, the egoic consciousness, comes to, I'm the king or queen of my environment. I've arrived, in looking at this. And then Virgo, taking stock. Well, here I am. What have I achieved? What is of value? What isn't? Discrimination, which then leads into the beginning of the 418 cycle, which is, so we've gone through from Aries as the first house through the lower half, the development of the ego consciousness to the 6th house, where we are now entering Libra, which is there in the beginning of the sequence of the transpersonal development. So we arrive at Libra, the balance, where there's a stasis there. I'm poised before the gates of death, which is the death of the egoic consciousness, which equates with Scorpio. And the injunction say, observe nature. What is each sign of the zodiac actually saying? You know, and I'm going to pop back to you in a second, Cath. I just wanted to illustrate the the Scorpioic as it manifests through the astrological side. And people went, the traditional idea, oh, Scorpio's got a bit of a sting. Well, Scorpio instinctively knows the vanities of the ego. All the paradigms and constructs that we have had as an egoic consciousness to preserve ourselves, preserve the ego, whether we be a martyr or a tyrant. We make these things that, because eventually the ego knows that it has one lifetime and it's going to die and faces oblivion. In the Scorpio manifestation is to prick that concept and say, well, who do you think you really are then? And of course, it's this is how each sign of the zodiac manifests in it instinctively. Its true nature. It's manifestation of the divine. As above, so below. So observe nature. And I'm just going to give the Scorpio illustration there, and I'm going to hand back to you, Cath, on that. Yeah.
Oh, I was hoping you'd go on and do Sagittarius and Capricorn as well.
Oh, okay. Well, would you like me to do so a bit?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. And then you,
if you've got anything to add, Cath, that would be good. If you had any extra bits to add that maybe Barry hasn't expressed in the way he did. But,
well, a slight diversion then. Is what Barry is describing here is what happens in the Ordeal X.
Right. Okay.
Ordeal X is a fourfold or 4-stage process, which everybody seems to go through who does the Sun Venus. And in the first place, you're in Libra and you've got everything nicely balanced and tuned, and you know exactly what you're doing, and you know all that you need to know. And then Scorpio comes up and stings you, and your life falls apart. and you go through the death phase, and then you come out of that, and you get into the Sagittarius and then into the Capricorn phase. And as I was saying before, Capricorn is the Baphomet of the zodiac. And Baphomet is a character who's completely balanced all the elements within himself. He's got air in his wings, he's got water in the fish scales, he's got fire above his head, and he's the earth.
He's kind of also not even a he, is he? He's kind of a
well, no, he's noticeably feminine.
Yeah, and also he's doing the pointing, as above, so below.
Yes. And so what happens in the Ordeal X is you eventually arrive at a state where you find that you are balanced within yourself, or the elements of your personality will become balanced, and you will have a clear understanding of what you are and what you're not. And the dualities that have been in conflict will no longer be in conflict. You'll be a balanced individual, and that'll improve your magic and your sex life and everything else.
A good foundation upon which to work. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Right. So in a sense, it's just the beginning once you've been through all of that.
Yeah, it can take years.
Yeah.
To go from one end to the other.
So what we're talking about here is, again, for those who may be listening and wondering what on earth all of this is railing at or moving towards, what this is essentially being described here is a process of initiation, but in a very real way.
Yes.
With regards to the individual in relation to the cosmos, with their place in life and everything, every element of their life. Yeah, and also this is an extremely individual thing, so it's not something that can be packaged so easily through, say, for example, a set formula. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah. You just do the work and see what happens.
Yeah, I think the essence here is one of the when I describe the astrology, and as an astrologer, if someone comes along and says, "Oh, I've had a grandchild, can you do it the child's horoscope?" And a competent astrologer will discern the personality and the life path of that baby. Never seen it, never had any contact with this being. It simply looks at the positions of the celestial bodies and their angles to one another. The celestial bodies being the archetypal as represented by the planets. So what's one saying is, well, who is this child? This child is a manifestation of the planetary configurations at that moment in time. And that's every one of us. So we are a conversation of the gods at that moment in time. And that conversation explores itself through time. So it's a moment in time. And I like to say, in the words of the bard, if I paraphrase it, there is a tide in the affairs of man, carried at the flood takes one to great things. So any moment that is recognized consciously becomes a timeline. So if we take this, that we are a conversation of the gods, and we want to link ourselves with the celestial configurations at a particular time, then we create a birth. So when we're talking about ceremonial magic in terms of the 418, by marking those moments in time, the entry of the moon into Libra, we are setting an initiatory process in, where we're tipping the scales of perfect balance into the breaking down of the egoic concept, which is personal to every one of us, whatever our concept is, which the breaking down of that releases the soul, the seed, the spark of the divine, which is it within all of us.
Right.
So once the nurturing of the fruit breaks away and dies in Scorpio, the secret seed is released anew. And this enters into the Sagittarius phase. Right. And you see in Sagittarians, the sort of, why not? Let's do this. Let's do that. Freedom is expressed in the Sagittarius personality. And also an interest in philosophy, religion, spirituality as a Sagittarian thing, because it's that secret seed, having been stripped of the ego consciousness, now has a connection with the divine. It's released into that oblivion, and then in Capricorn, it returns the secret seed is reborn.
Yes.
In the world, this is how we have the Capricorn, the most earthy and material of the signs.
It's the epiphany. It's the point of the
That's right.
epiphany as
and
well.
So in the Buddhist concept, what did you do before initiation? Carried water, chopped wood. What did you do after? The same. However, you're initiated. You've come to understand the awareness of manifestation in the world. And I think we can just take the Christ myth. I mean, every religion has this death resurrection myth going on. So if you look at the Christ myth, where we have the cross of matter, in Christ the man dies, he suffers on the cross. And if we look at the idea of suffering in its broadest expression, we suffer love, we suffer joy, we suffer whatever. So we suffer on the cross of matter.
And at this point, let's not fail to mention that in the EQ English Qaballa Gematria, we have 418 equaling the mysteries of crucifixion. Is this not correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Which isn't exactly what you're talking about. So this just shows you how incredibly the system is self-referential with regards to the actual alphabet, its placement one to the other, its relationship to exactly the cycles you're describing, and exactly what Barry has just described. And you saying about it being a fourfold process, and then it relates to the mysteries of crucifixion, amongst many other amazing parallels.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, and I think we look particularly at the moon's passage that goes through all the signs of the zodiac every month, and so it's interesting that in the Christian calendar, Easter is always chosen. I mean, politically, it's either side of it, but in essence, it's when the moon enters what's known as the burning way, which is the Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius sequence. And so this is why Easter moves slightly each year. Clearly, the Christian Church fathers were aware of the mystical side, maybe from antiquity, and they latched onto this the Christ myth of the death of the ego, the release into spirit, and then the resurrection, the initiated spirit coming back into human consciousness, which of course is the God of love, and every religion, every system follows that. Not to say the least, we have Ramadan around that time as well. Yeah. So this is a very arcane knowledge.
Yes.
This is the beauty of Stellar Magick. It transcends any dogma. This is something that we can actually say, well, the stars are in this position, the mundane chakras, the planets are in this position. We can align ourselves, whatever dogma or religion we come to, whether it be Native American or whatever. It equates with the medicine wheel in their system. So this is almost like the foundation of everything, because it's nature and we can see it directly.
I was going to say, this is very much the language of nature being expressed through in its most direct form possible to ourselves, in terms of us entering consciously into it, I would say.
Yes.
Yeah. Easter is the first full moon after the spring equinox.
Yeah.
And Ramadan, I think, is the first new moon.
Right.
After the spring equinox. And these are astronomical observations that anybody can do, that have been done since man began to look at the stars and make observations of sun and moon,
Right.
and began to be able to predict seasons and seasonal changes, and when was a good time to start something. You guaranteed to have a summer to follow the spring when you plant your seed. Well, if you plant your seed on the spring equinox, you'll definitely have a summer.
Something that I definitely want to mention at this point as well, because I was going to say, as well as the 418 cycle, which we've been talking about here, which is those 4 signs from Libra to Capricorn, there is the other very important aspect which you were working with and experimenting with right from very closely after discovering the cipher of Owl 276, which we've been speaking about before, and that is the Sun-Venus pentagram itself, and how that also has a significant place within these cycles as well. Could you say a little more, perhaps, on the Sun-Venus pentagram? Because one thing I do want to say is I became aware of, through the work of EQ and the published materials of EQ, I became aware for the first time of the Sun-Venus pentagram and its relation to this work back in about 1996 was when I first came across it. And ever since then, there was virtually nobody talking about this, no one really. And I'm sure you will have noticed in recent years, or especially in the last couple of years, how it's suddenly all over the place, this Sun-Venus thing.
Yeah, people are gradually becoming a little bit more aware of astrological and astronomical phenomena, aren't they, and taking notice of things, which is very gratifying. But when we started doing Sun-Venuses, I don't think anybody was doing Sun-Venuses. I don't think anybody thought of doing Sun-Venuses. I don't think very many people were aware that the aspect formed this pentagram.
It's interesting, Cath. Sorry to interrupt there, but it's interesting because there's one very well-known so-called Hellenic astrologer. I do believe he's supposed to be quite good, and that's a guy called Chris Brennan, who's doing a lot of things online at the moment. And something that I've noticed is that he has started, with this particular Sun-Venus, has started to pay attention quite a lot to it, and starting to backtrack at certain points that he's been looking at whenever it happened before. And it's as if he's starting to genuinely realize that there's something quite important about this, but it seems like he's never heard of your work or never come across any of this type of stuff, because I can genuinely see that he's kind of piecing it together himself and going, this is interesting. Like, this happened last time it happened, and these things happen. It seems like a really good time to maybe use these influences for something, and he's trying to work it out, but he's very honest about it.
That's interesting. Yes.
So what part does the Sun-Venus play in this, would you say?
Well, you perform the Sun-Venus ritual, and then what happens next follows the formula of those 4 signs. So you have a period of quite peaceful judgment of the situation that you're in, and having just done a Sun-Venus ritual, you're probably going to be feeling pretty good about yourself and the world at large. And you might have some plans to do this or that, and then you'll find yourself in the Scorpio stage where everything kind of deteriorates and runs into brick walls and generally goes wrong. And you have to make significant alterations. You have to rethink a lot of your attitudes to survive that period without going insane, or without doing some damage somewhere. Can be really quite a tricky period in one's life. And then you get through that, and you get to the Sagittarius phase, where it's like the whirlwind departs and leaves you dropped somewhere, and you're looking around trying to figure out where you are and what you should do next. You're halfway between this and that.
So that's kind of almost like a wanderer of the wastes kind of.
Exactly so. The Sagittarius is a centaur. He's half man and half beast. He's neither quite one thing nor quite the other. It's a very alchemical sign.
Yeah.
Sagittarius, symbolically. And so you wander around for a bit, and then you find that everything comes back into tune.
Right. Yeah.
In the Capricorn phase, and things begin to run more smoothly for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. Yes, I think when you look at what we're talking about with Sun conjunct Venus, here we have the goddess of love on every level, the goddess of love, and the principle of love being the great attractor. None can unite the divided, but love. And so here we have the Venus, who is the goddess of art and beauty, and all the things that we like. We're attracted to this. The divine game of love. So she is the supreme goddess in this way made manifest, and so this goddess of attraction, this principle, this archetypal principle, comes together with the light of the world, the sun, the vitality of life in our solar system, the solar plexus, the essence of what moves everything. So here we have the principle, the goddess of love, uniting with the prime mover of light. So she attracts the consciousness of the sun into her being. It's a consummation. And so by aligning ourselves through ceremony, by marking that time, we align ourselves with that uniting principle of the love on all levels into our own vital being. And this sets in this course of action that Cath's just got mentioned. And this is why the Sun Venus is so important and been so revered down the millennia. I believe even the slight, I think Avebury Circle marks by marking the stones in a particular way, it will predict the next Sun Venus and so on. Oh. So this is this pentagrammic form, the conjunction of Sun and Venus over 7 years, forms 5 points around the geocentric zodiac of the Earth in the center, and the joining it. And we know how the pentagram appears through all all studies and all philosophies and so on. So this is the importance, but the principle is the none can unite the divided, but love.
Right. Yes.
And it happens. The ordeal acts and all that happens because what you're doing is invoking that which is about as perfect as it can be. And you are identifying with that, and you are not perfect.
Yeah, right.
You are not a perfect vessel to receive this.
Right.
And so they have to kind of reform you, mold you a bit to make you able to receive these stellar influences, the powers of these gods and goddesses.
I was going to say, yes, the actual the fact of actually receiving these things, and the very fact you point out the fact that there is this immense imperfection in all of us, and so as a result of receiving these rays through into ourselves, like you're saying, it can actually what is actually supposed to be perfect and beneficial to some may actually be a bit of a dissonance, as they're still identifying with the lower aspects of themselves.
Yes.
Maybe this is partly the Scorpio phase that you're talking about. I do believe, because if you're too identified with those lower parts of the self, there's going to be a lot of pain involved in that transmutation.
Yes. I think it's sort of like the fear, the ego's perception. It's fear of oblivion, the fear of its own loss, and as human beings, we, like I said earlier, that we construct all these paradigms of who we think we are in order to survive this fear of oblivion. And I think there was a rather beautiful, for me, which was a great epiphany, was the statement in the third book of the law, where some of the concepts in there are horrific, and you think, oh my God, this is terrible. I can't, some horrible things that are mentioned in there, and I think Cath discusses it in her book, is the statement, I peck at the eyes of Jesus as he hangs upon the cross.
Yeah, most people would throw the book straight in the bin at that point. It's like a lot of people
exactly.
would.
But when you look at it from the the English Qaballa, and break it down in the statement into its numerical value, I peck at the eyes of Jesus, is fear, but the terror of the ego as it suffers upon the cross, and the blinding of the eyes of Jesus. The value of the eyes of Jesus has the same value as Venus, Neptune. If you add those two, Venus and Neptune, and you say goddess of love, I think it's 216, and 216 adds up to the eyes of Jesus. So we look at the astrology again in the numerical context of this statement, and you go, oh, so fear is pecking at the eyes of Jesus. So Neptune, Venus, Neptune the mystic, Venus the goddess of love. Put the two together, sublime beauty, sublime love. And what better expression of sublime love than Christ consciousness, where everything is seen through the eyes of love and sublime beauty. Exactly. So if fear blinds sublime beauty, the suffering of the ego upon the cross of matter.
Yes.
So this is the working by using English Qaballa. You have these great epiphanies. Well, of course that's true. Yeah.
Yes, and it takes us straight back again to what we were saying about, like, if one is not sufficiently purified or willing to accept these divine rays into the self, then yes, the lower identification will be blind to what's happening, you might say.
Yeah. So this is the working with the manuscript, but with the English Qaballa that illuminates the meaning of all this. Like say, Sun Venus has the same value as magician.
The other thing I want to say is the fact that other Kabbalistic systems that people may be familiar with, of course, we were not born as, well, most people in the West are not born in the Hebraic tradition. Most people are not actually born as Hebrew Kabbalists. Most people are not born speaking, or reading or speaking traditional Greek, for example. And so most people don't experience that unfiltered, direct perception by working with a gammatric system like the English Qaballa. It's in the English-speaking language, and so therefore there's no filter between what you're learning and what's becoming part of you and the reality you're experiencing. There's no filter there anymore. And that's in itself an extremely powerful thing that many people who are into the esoteric or occult may never have experienced before.
Yes, I do think that is enormously important, and it's enormously important to realize that, because Hebrew Kabbalah is an enormously sophisticated field of study, and has been going for thousands of years. And if you do read any of the great Hebrew Kabbalists like Isaac Luria, for example, I promise you it'll blow your socks off with some mystical idea, some philosophical statement that is just so beautiful.
Yes,
and he's arrived at it entirely through Hebrew Kabbalah and the faith in the Hebrew scriptures and the Hebrew Torah and the Hebrew interpretation of creation and the existence of God and what God is and what God does. That's all in the Hebrew tradition. If you're not born into that, if you haven't been brought up in that, then personally, I think you should leave it alone.
You're not going to get what those who basically the rabbi, the masters, because that's what rabbi means. The masters would sit around in a collegium and knock ideas around surrounding the sacred scriptures until they came to at least some sort of idea where they could kind of agree, and then a new Qabala or a new Cabal or a new group or school would be born, whereby they would at least agree on some principles, and then they could pass it down to some students. But and that's what was kind of happening back in the 1600s in Prague and things like this.
Yeah.
But since those times, there's never been anything for the English-speaking world that's truly a living thing that is essentially doing precisely that again, or has the potential for that to happen again.
Yes. And the other thing about EQ, which makes it stand out, is that it is modern. It does accommodate the three outer planets. It does accommodate modern science and other modern ways of thinking, modern paradigms. That I don't think these ancient systems were really in any position to incorporate, because they didn't have a knowledge of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto.
And we still don't know what's to come.
Well, no,
There's
we don't.
things to be incorporated inside, which we haven't even fathomed yet, I'm sure.
Yes, yeah.
And I think the elegance of this stellar magic is that in the contemporary world, the here and now, through astrology, anybody can just draw a chart up and realize that we're looking at the natural world in front of us, and look at the positions of the archetypes. As these are the planets, these are the human condition, the components of the human condition, and so it really doesn't matter. The astrology goes through Hindu, through the Islamic traditions, through a friend of mine who is from the Native American tradition said, "Oh my goodness, this fits on the medicine wheel." Because of course, why wouldn't it? We're talking about nature, that you can go out in your own backyard and look up and say, "Oh, well, I can see Jupiter in the sky. I can see Saturn in the sky." And at this particular time here on the 8th of June, we see an alignment of the planets before dawn. We can stand out there and say we can see they're all in line. And going back to that principle of as above, so below. And the point I was making earlier about the birth of a baby had been a conversation of the archetypes as beings. If we can see those planets, those archetypes in alignment in the sky in front of us, it's happening in us.
Yes, of course.
We're not divorced. We're in no way divorced from the universe. We're part of it, And so what's happening in the heavens is reflected in our own magical, electrical, whatever you want to call it, being. And this is why we're seeing at the moment so many people say, "Wow, this is an amazing portal that's opened up." Well, yes. This alignment, if we mark that time and notice it in the way quantum physics is explained, if you notice something, you will set it in forward a timeline, and we'll catch the tide of man. The tide which carries the egoic consciousness into the divine unity, in so much that one brings into one's egoic consciousness one's connection with the divine within oneself, as expressed through the individual's personality. And I'd like to sort of talk about the post Capricorn phase. We're talking it moving into the Aquarian age.
Yes, exactly.
And we listen to the Aquarian personality speaking, "Well, I'm okay, you're okay. Don't impose your paradigm on me." And so you get this idea of the cult of the individual, which is in the modern world. But of course, well, what does that mean? Does that mean a selfish individualism? Well, yes, from the egoic perspective, it could manifest as that. But if the egoic consciousness is aware of its own divinity, then therefore it's aware of unity, and that we are all one. So you get this idea in the Aquarian, a sense of community. I want to form a community. So the Aquarian age is community through expressing the divine impulse in the personality that it's inhabiting. So if I'm a surgeon or an artist or a craftsman or a communicator, whatever the color of the personality, with that divine connection, will be in service to humanity and in service to the community. So this sort of explains the Aquarian concept. I'm okay, you're okay. I have the right to express myself.
And of course, there's been a very clear mark of, on a vast scale recently, the entry into very much into a lot of Aquarian themes because of the movement into Pluto moving into Aquarius as well. So this is causing a deep transformation of the collective, it would appear.
Yes. And the advantage with EQ is that it's non-denominational. It's not part of an establishment religion. It's not going to ask you to do such and such a thing every Sunday or every Monday or every Friday. It's not going to ask you to conform to a load of rules and regulations and things that people generally these days are not not so interested in conforming to. It's very much for the individual practitioner to make their own way, and it's the Stellar Magick side of it. It's simply observing what's going on in the solar system. You're not required to do much more than that.
It's so contemporary with modern, with our present thinking, where everything's expected to be like this instant and so on. This is it. If you mark the moon's passage into the burning way with doing certain ceremonies, you will set into process and the initiatory process of the egoic consciousness. And this is the beauty of how it's all lined up. It's very relevant for the Aquarian age, actually.
Yes. It is.
I mean, traditionally, Aquarius is known to be the sign which governs the general arts of astrology anyway. Am I correct in thinking this?
Yes, exactly. Well, it's a study of the universe. If you take it from who am I as an individual, I am, and meaning all of us, I am, well, crikey, through astrology, it shows me that I am a conversation of the cosmos.
Yeah.
Made manifest in the world.
Yes. So, I mean, so Cath, you were saying about it being not related specifically to any religion or dogmatic form in any respect. And this brings us on to an interesting subject, because of course the entire thing of EQ was delivered from the Book of the Law, and obviously that's related to the whole ideology of Thelema, which was something which came out of a lot of the ideology of Crowley, who obviously became very, very influential on many generations of people in the English magical scene since, has inspired many people. However, I feel very much from both of you that you're in no way holding on to a lot of the things that people who tend to follow Crowley's works and Thelema and the rest of it, you seem to be almost surpassed a lot of that ideology, and so, but yet you are so coming from this revelation you both experienced. I think that's a shining example of where this goes.
I think as someone pointed out, you don't blame the postman for the letter that he's delivered, and as was pointed out at a meeting by somebody who said, well, could it have been Rose, Crowley's wife in Cairo? Because the injunction was given to Crowley that under no circumstances was he to turn round and listen to this being that was dictating to him. And he said that it was dictated to him in perfect, unaccented English.
Yes.
Well, could that Rose was a medium?
Yes.
And it was Rose who said, they want to talk to you.
Yes.
So it all came from Rose, which is interesting. Her name alone.
The name alone, yes, of course.
And being a woman. So could this actually have been Rose who was channeling the dictation? And it would make sense. And that Crowley was the scribe. He was the postman.
He was just there to deliver the letter. Yes.
I would take that on board. I think Rose was the channel because it ticks the boxes down there. And of course, in the Edwardian times, one really does have to look at the concept of the times that it was delivered in. Would Crowley have taken any notice if he turned around and saw it was his wife speaking?
it was pretty. He'd probably be far too proud to have even put that in the history records. Probably, I don't know, but who
Yeah.
knows? Who knows? It's an interesting piece of speculation, but it's one that I feel is quite plausible.
Yeah, well, the Stellar Magick, unequivocally,
Hmm.
is feminine and the divine feminine
Yes,
made manifest. The
yes,
universe, the infinite space, and all the stars therein. The supreme deity knew it. Um, my lithe body arched for love, my hands touching the earth and not harming so much as a single flower. Well, this is the god, the voice of the expression of the goddess. Of course, the stars and the heaven touches the earth. There's no gap between the
no,
sky and
no,
the earth.
it's pure continuum, pure continuum.
Absolute
Yes,
continuum.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so very much this is it, is waking up to that ever-living divine reality of the divine permeating all things continuously forever.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
so
yes, yes. The consciousness of the continuity of existence.
Yeah.
That's what it says in the Book of the Law, and that seems a very good description.
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
With
And
with, with the added um, Christ consciousness, it's called, but
yes,
it's not really anything to do with the Christian Christ. It's a phenomenon much greater,
unconditional love.
unconditional love. Yes.
Absolutely. Well. Again, the even the name Christ comes from the original Christos of the ancient Greeks. The Christos, which equals 93, by the way, Christos.
Yes.
But the Christos is actually the anointing, the one who is just anointed. And anointed with what? Anointed with continuity, the eternal flow of the golden oils of the stars and the sun and the heavens forever and ever. You know, it's
Mm. And you look at the one of my favorite quotations from Librel is the um, existence is pure joy. All the
uh-huh.
sorrows are but as shadows; they pass and are done.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at divine ecstasy, the love in the Hindu tradition, where the universe is dreamed in ecstasy into existence. Yeah.
Right. Right.
You know,
And one of the things which is very, very interesting is the fact that once again I may have spoken to you before about a very important thing, which is the development of the present moment awareness in all things, in all times. The more that, like when I've been sat with groups of students and I've extended the practice for, a whole day, for example, we wake up in the morning, we keep practicing all day, nobody speaks, we just keep working, and occasionally just keep prodding people to sort of make sure they continuously stay in the state. What results from that is an intense feeling of bliss and ecstasy that starts to permeate the entire body.
Mhm.
Everything becomes ecstatic. That's when you know you've hit the practice properly, because you know that you just sense there is no separation with everything, and the more that you begin to wake up to this, the more the vibration becomes ecstatic. It's a fascinating, amazing thing. Yeah.
it's that cognition that the Stellar Magic and markings of the time initiates that in one's being. Uh,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
and it's incredibly exciting. It's to see this as it, in one's friends and contemporaries who are,
Yeah.
taking this on board and doing the ceremonies and marking the times, and to
Yeah.
see this link coming.
Yeah.
You can hear it in the way you speak. I think the Native Americans have it. They call it the hollow bone, where you
Uh-huh.
realize that the divine flows through and makes the sound, and we are the hollow bone.
Ah,
You know,
okay.
it's so elegant in every discipline, in every belief system. It's there.
Yeah.
Underlie the principles are the same. You know,
Yes, yes.
what is initiation? Yeah.
You can use English Qaballa to examine any system that
Mhm.
can be expressed in English. So you can use EQ to examine Christianity or Judaism
Yeah.
or North American Indian traditions.
Yeah.
All of these different
Yeah.
areas. It's all approaching the same mystery.
Yeah.
What we call the mystery, for want of a better word, because we don't know what it is that we're searching for.
Well, I agree with you, but I would also say mystery is very much this idea of, it's like, I think it's expressed through the old, medieval woodcuts and alchemical diagrams of like the veils of Isis, where she's sort of showing you her thigh through her dress or whatever, and it's all kind of basically the veils are on, but it's just part of the game. The
Yeah,
mystery is almost like a
Yeah.
play. It's like a game. It's not really
yeah,
a mystery. The
yeah,
mystery is, why do we hide from pure ecstasy?
Yes.
yeah.
It's there all the time. Why do we keep covering it up? Why do we keep having to do this? Is it like that thing where we need to save the last bits on the most tasty bits on the plate till last? Is that what it's all about? Like, are we playing some kind of game like that with ourselves sometimes? Who knows? I mean, I'm just
Yeah.
throwing
I,
a few
I
funny
rather,
ideas out there.
yeah, I rather like the idea of, well, the initiated consciousness. You're the observer in the director's chair watching the
Right.
play, and
Yeah.
now and again you get off the chair and join in on the play, and then you have
Right.
an epiphany. Oh yes, I'm actually can step off the stage, and
Yeah.
look
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
see the
Yeah.
play for what it is.
Right.
You know. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
We do our bit, when we join the play, we add our contribution to the play. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Mm,
Exactly.
mm.
So, I feel that we have possibly come to the, at least for today, or maybe some other time. Who knows? We'll have some other conversation some other day. But for today, we've definitely come to, I think, the end of what we could have explored today, and it's getting quite late here anyway in England, Barry.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Yes.
but apart from that, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and an absolute delight to finally have the honor and the opportunity to pass your words, your work, in front of the view of other people who may be interested in it, because I do believe it's so, so important. And you're such rare examples of people who are working honestly and earnestly in the esoteric, in this modern day. So, apart from thanking you enormously for your time and being here, I'd like to finish just by saying, how do people find you, Barry? If people are interested in working with you, or in some, or working with you through for consultation regarding astrological matters and so on, and the same with you, Cath. How do people get in touch with your work, your art, your books, your publications through Hadean Press and so on?
My books are available on Amazon and from Hadean Press, I think.
Yes.
Details at least are on Hadean Press's website.
Okay.
I'm on Facebook. I'm
Hmm.
available on Facebook. And I show my paintings on YouTube. But I'm
Is there a
that's
particular name for the channel? On
Magic Brush.
Okay, Magic Brush. Right.
Mm.
Okay. So that's how you can find Cath and Cath's work. And Barry, as for yourself, how do people get in touch with you?
Well, I mean, I don't put myself out there and all very much, but Barry Down on Facebook. You can send me a Facebook message if you like, and take it from there. But just say who you are and what what you a little, just a word to say what your interest is. It's that would probably be the easiest. I know when I go traveling, I just drop my Facebook name in and say, let's keep in contact through there. But definitely, if it just to say, Tom Brown or Susan Smith, interest English Qaballa or something like that. So I know, and then just put Lee Gerrard, to say where you've come from.
Right.
Otherwise, and then I can just get back to you if you so desire.
Fantastic.
And I would classify myself as an esoteric astrologer, an intuitive astrologer. I'd come under that. It's to devote. Why has the soul come into this world? And that's I have Pluto rising in Leo, so I'm a bit of that sort of what's the bottom line, and so
well, thank you so much, both of you, and thank you everybody for hanging out this long and listening to all of this. I assume that if anyone's hanging around at the end here listening to this, that you're definitely interested in this subject, and so I'm sure you're honoured, to be quite honest, having listened to these two and everything they have to impart to you. It's taken me many years to have this chat with them, so you've been quite lucky. So thanks and good night, Cath, and thanks and good night, Barry. Thanks, good day, Barry, over there.
Thank you, Lee. It's been a delight, absolute delight.
All right. So bye for now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Yeah.